All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Phil Crimmins. If you don't know me, I lived in China for 11 years and I learned Mandarin to fluency. And this is Morty, by the way. And say hello, Morty. You don't want to say anything? Okay, fine. Well, Morty's an adorable little guy and he's sitting on my lap. And this is Rick. Rick will never sit on laps, but she likes to be nearby. So if any of you don't know me, I am Phil Crimmins. I'm one of the co-founders of Mandarin Blueprint and lived in China for 11 years, started a business, gave speeches in Chinese, played music all around the country. And so I immersed as much as I could, not just in the language, but in the culture and the society. And so, I like to talk with other Chinese learners and give them a chance to discuss what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and how to build a better Mandarin learning situation for everyone. So I created Mandarin Blueprint with my buddy Luke to fix the broken Chinese education system once and for all. And our courses are helping over 10,000 people reach university level Chinese in a fraction of the time and for a fraction of the cost. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about community in Mandarin learning. But first, let me just give you a little bit of update of what I've been doing, because I was doing live streams daily and then I was off for a couple of weeks because I was on first a holiday, then a very interesting workshop to bring Mandarin Blueprint to the next level. So let me talk about what that means. So first, I went on vacation. My mother-in-law came to town from Serbia, and that was great. She hadn't really been to many places in the U.S. Like technically about 50 years ago, she was in New York and L.A. and Hawaii when she was working as a flight attendant for Yugoslav Airways, which is no longer an airline nor a country. But she was had been to a few places. But of course, New York, L.A., and Hawaii are not exactly... They're definitely in America, but they're not exactly representative of what you might imagine the U.S. to be. So I was showing her around, and then we visited my family in the Philadelphia area, and that was great. So, and my wife got her green card, which was excellent news midway through the vacation. So that was wonderful. And so we're very happy about that. But then I ended the sort of holiday or time off from being directly in Mandarin Blueprint, going to a scaling workshop in Las Vegas, hosted by acquisition.com, which is Alex Hormozy and Layla Hormozy. They have big old YouTube channels talking about business, basically. And of course, I've always felt like I need business advice because I know about teaching Chinese. And when I was learning Chinese, I figured out a way, along with Luke and along with several of my friends, to learn faster. And so we turned that over a lot of research into video courses. But once we had the video courses, we were like, okay, we can sell this. This could be a business. But I wasn't a business person. I wasn't an entrepreneur. Like, it was the first time ever being an entrepreneur. So whenever there's like a business seminar of some kind from people whose opinions I trust, I want to go to it because, hey, I can always learn a lot more, right? So the reason why I bring that up is because one of the things that they said that we should do as a part of making Mandarin Blueprint a better business that is good for our customers and members is to build a better community. So Mandarin Blueprint's courses do have a community forum in it. I'm giving thumbs up. They do have a community forum in it, but the thing is that community forum is not very functional. It's running on the platform Kajabi, which runs our video courses, and I'm very grateful to Kajabi. Also, by the way, your chats aren't showing up on screen. Why is that? Oh, now they are. Okay, there we go. Figured it out. So now it's just way too big, though, but that's fine. I'll make it smaller. So Kajabi is this platform that they do online video courses, and that's cool. Like, that's neat that they do that. There we go. Haha. That's good. All right. So Kajabi is a video course platform that we host Mandarin Blueprint on, and it has a community forum, but it's not that great. It just basically is a long sequential list of posts, and yeah, you can like the post, but there's not really a good community interaction. If any of you are here in the Mandarin Blueprint course, let me know what you think, because I've always found that the functionality of it, it's just like it's so limited. And so what we're going to do instead moving forward, and we haven't implemented this yet, I'm kind of just giving you guys a preview of what we're going to do, is we're going to run a community forum on the platform School. That's SKOOL.com. And the School is a really cool new service that basically is designed around community building. And so instead of just having sort of a forum that just is posts and, people can just answer that individual post if they happen to be paying attention, instead it will be community forum based stuff that is not just, it'll have categories, it'll have free content, it'll have a calendar where we can set up coffee hours, live Q&A sessions. We can do accountability buddy sessions. There will be the opportunity to ask a question about any lesson in any of our courses. And instead of having it only be seen by the Mandarin Blueprint member service team, it can be seen by anybody in the community, and anybody can answer and give their recommendations. So, for example, at the moment, in the Mandarin Blueprint courses, you can leave a comment below any lesson video, and you can see any comments that were left previously. But in the moment that you leave the comment, the only people who get notified about it are the Mandarin Blueprint member service team, which is, great, and we are always happy to answer any questions. But it just struck me as not very helpful in building community, because you could ask that very same question in a place where anybody who is online, anybody who is currently in the course can see your question, and they can potentially give you an answer almost instantly. Because what's nice about School is it gives you all of this incentive to sort of gamify the experience of interacting and building friendships and building study buddies and coming up with ways to maybe even meet up with people. And so we're very excited about the idea of putting together these school communities, and there's going to be one community that is a free community, although you will have to qualify for it, and then the other is going to be a paid community that will be associated with our courses. So it's very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to this opportunity to really take the community to the next level. But I figured the best way to start learning a bit about this is to ask you guys what it is you're looking for in a community in terms of learning Mandarin. So there's obviously the questions that I put on screen here. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What's blocking you? But I'm also very interested in what you guys want to know from the perspective, or like what you guys would like to have in terms of a community. So let's talk about that a little bit today. And if you guys have any other questions that are related to Mandarin learning, I'm more than happy to talk about that as well. But let me just go through some of the questions that have come up so far. So we have a question here, or a few things that have come up. So first of all, we had Chioma, who is mentioning that he feels, he or she, I'm not sure, but they feel that they're about 50% good in writing, but only 10% in speaking. And just for what it's worth, if you learn characters, this is actually a pretty common phenomenon, because speaking and listening are sort of harder than reading and writing. That might seem strange with a language as seemingly complex with its writing system as Chinese. But the reason why that's still kind of true is that it takes a knowledge of the written language and being able to read to help distinguish between the sounds. That might seem like a really counterintuitive thing, but Chinese has a lot of homophones, right? So the fact that so many words sound exactly the same, but the characters look nothing alike, means that learning how to read and write is actually hugely helpful for listening. It might not seem like they would be related, but when you read sentences and you see, oh, okay, it's clear to me that this word here is made up of characters I've learned, and it's pronounced 鸡肉, for example. And because I know what the characters are, I know it's referring to the word muscle and not the word chicken, right? And those are pronounced the exact same way. But because the character for chicken and the character for mussel look nothing alike, when you're reading, you have no confusion. When you're listening, it's completely like, what are you talking about? Lifting chickens, or like lifting something to grow your chickens? What? It's like, so you get the idea. So and then I asked what's blocking, and he said lack of practice and money for a private tutor. So one belief I'd like to break for you, Chioma, is that you must have a private tutor. That's not necessarily what you have to have. I would say there are a bunch of free apps. So Tandem is one. Another one is Hello Talk. I once spoke to somebody who worked for Hello Talk, and he told me that there are 10 Chinese speakers for every single English speaker on Hello Talk. And all they ask in return is some time to practice their English. So when you don't have a lot of money, your alternative is time, right? So if you're willing to spend an hour, half of that hour can be spent speaking Chinese and the other half hour can be spent speaking English. And so instead of paying with money, you're paying with 30 minutes of English time. So that's a way that you can get practice. Also, if you have you can talk to ChatGPT. Obviously, ChatGPT has a bit of a subscription fee. So, maybe you can try some different free trials of it. Perhaps, I don't know if they even have a free trial, but I don't know. Maybe these days you can still have a conversation. But the point is that regardless, though, you can definitely get practice without having to hire a tutor. So I would just point that out. Okay, so let's see here. Arm with Harmony says, starting from zero, want to reach fluency. Blocking you is cost, and what you want from a community is a YouTube channel that teaches well and uses sponsors or ads for revenue. Maybe a channel like something freestyle from a citizen living in China that speaks English and Chinese, right? So yeah, cost. I would say, again, it comes back to that thing. If you don't have money, then you'd have to spend time. And if you don't have time or money, then I would just say you probably have bigger needs than learning Mandarin right now, right? So, if you don't have money, then you can apply time to the problem. And if you don't have time, then you can apply money to the problem. But it's not guaranteed that you must spend a huge amount of money up front. You'll just have to spend more time because you're going to have to spend more time learning stuff on your own and putting together a system. The problem with learning, like just from YouTube, for example, is that it's not systemized. Like there's a bunch of great content on YouTube. We make some of it. But the issue is that the problem with Chinese has never been that there's a lack of content. It's the lack of the content being organized and put into an order that makes logical sense based on what you've previously learned. And that's what we built here at Mandarin Blueprint. That's what the Blueprint course is. But, you can still structure a system, but you would have to make it yourself. Now, obviously, that's time intensive, but if you've got time, then that's the thing to do there. Just a second, my wife is texting me. Is this okay? Good, right? Nothing urgent. So let's just see here. So let's check this out. What else do we have going here? All right. Happy to be here, says Prisma. Happy you're here, Prisma 3D Crafts. It would be cool to have a community of fellow learners. I think it could be an additional motivation to keep going. Not sure how it can be successfully built. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that you think that. So one of the things that we're planning on doing is building out this school community. That's SKOOL.com. They're going for school spelled that way to get across the idea that, hey, you know what? The old education systems, they're getting a little outdated, aren't they? We need some school, not school, right? So I like their whole philosophy, and that forum is going to be built on the idea of gamifying community interaction. And so we're going to be applying that to Mandarin Blueprint. I'm going to have two versions, a free and a paid. Now, again, if it's free, there's going to be a qualification involved. We're still working out what that is. But for the paid one, it's basically what comes alongside the courses. And I think we may even make a version of the paid community that's just the community with no courses involved. Although, you'd probably want to have the courses, otherwise it's not going to be as useful to you. And if you don't have the courses, you might as well use the free community. But we're working on building that. We haven't finished it yet. So, if you're thinking like, hey, where is it? We'll come with an announcement for sure when the time has come. But I'm very excited about it. What they've done over there is really impressive. I'm quite amazed at how well they've put together the idea of a community forum in some manner. So we will be adding that. It's not just a forum either. It's a place to post, and you can post about specific things. And it's also got a place where you can see a calendar for upcoming events. We can make a Q&A session. I know that Luke and I are definitely planning on doing some Q&As. We're probably going to have our Chinese experts do some coffee hours where you can come in and answer any question or ask any questions from them. And so, these things are going to be a part of it. There's going to be a leaderboard. There's going to be some free content in the classrooms there, and you get extra points in the community for watching those videos and also for commenting on them or asking questions about them. So it's very exciting. And what's really cool too is that we recently just hired a new director of operations here at Mandarin Blueprint, Heather Tucker. She used to work for Fluent Forever. Some of you guys may know about Fluent Forever. It's an app that's also in the language learning space, but they kind of do a lot of different languages. We obviously are focused only on Mandarin. And she has been really great to bring on board. Today is her first full day, so it's early days yet, but she will likely be very involved in the process of getting some people in the community very engaged. All right, so let's see what else we have here in the chat. We have Michi Michi or Miki Miki says, "Hiya, love your videos. Greetings from Lima, Peru." Well, welcome, and we're happy to have you here. Maybe nowadays such online communities are built on platforms like Discord. Yeah, I mean, Discord is one place where you can have online communities. I don't like it personally. I think that this is just my opinion, but every time I go on Discord, I feel confused. I look around and I'm like, where is everything? How do I know if I've seen everything? It just instantly kind of turns me off. And I'm not really sure if that's a logical feeling. Maybe it's just my own sort of forum community sense of, I don't know, not being really into it. But I think school.com is awesome. Much easier to understand. Alex says, "Hi, Shifu. I have a question in relation to how to make input in Mandarin Chinese, listening to music or podcasts, yet not understanding most of what being said is useful." So you're asking about incomprehensible input, right? So comprehensible input is the key to language acquisition. So if you hear a message that goes into your ears or your eyes and you understood what it meant, that means it was comprehensible, and that makes if you imagine that building a language in your brain is like adding bricks to a building, you added a brick by getting that understandable messages. Now you need a lot of bricks to get to fluency, but that is, in a very basic sense, what you need. Now I think knowing that is about as useful as somebody saying to you, if you want to lose weight, burn more calories than you consume, right? It's like, yeah, technically that's true, but that's not the hard part, is it, right? And you can be getting incomprehensible input and then discover that if it's not comprehensible, you think, is this helping me? And here's what I would argue. In order to get comprehensible input, you must first build comprehension. So build first and get second. Now, listening to incomprehensible input does have a degree of building comprehension. Why? Because it gets your brain used to the sounds of the language. Okay, so if you get used to how the sounds are in the language and your ear becomes attuned to the differences, that will help you. And one of the things you can get some basic lessons to start to play a little noticing game. And I would highly recommend reframing the way you think about listening like this. So you learn about some basics of pronunciation. Maybe you learn about the 5 Mandarin tones. Ma, 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 right? And then ma for 青春. And what you learn at that point is that the different sounds create these different tones. Okay, can you notice any tones when you're listening to Chinese? Cool. How about you learn some initials and finals? Like, for example, you learn that the C sound in Chinese, the letter C, is pronounced like the TS in cats, right? Tss, 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 right? And you learn that the AO in Chinese is pronounced ao. And then you learn first tone is a single, relatively high sound. Cao. And then you hear somebody say, oh, 我在操作我的电脑. And maybe you didn't know everything else about that sentence, but because you understood cao, you heard 操作. You heard the cao there. And by the way, that sentence just means I'm controlling my computer right now. It's like a 操作 means to like control a piece of equipment or like a computer or whatever. And so if you notice that, that's a point where you noticed and you go, okay, great. I noticed that particular thing. And so that's going to get my brain a little bit more attuned to it. You're building comprehension. Now, when it comes to Chinese, the way to go from incomprehensible input to comprehensible input has a lot to do with getting the characters down. Because learning the Chinese characters is what makes so many things go from being completely incomprehensible to comprehensible, because if you know two characters, you know what word they make, and then you put it into a sentence made up of other characters and words you've already learned, that becomes a comprehensible input sentence. And that's where you start. That's the starting point. And then you start building that up. Now, what we did at Mandarin Blueprint is we take you from knowing absolutely nothing to getting comprehensible input in I guess 12 levels of the blueprint, 124 characters, or about 100 or so words. And the way we actually have a challenge that's linked below me, mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls, that what that does in the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge is in 30 days, you get to the point of reading sentences without pinyin. And so you're reading Chinese characters directly and you understand them, right? And so we challenge you to do that. You can do that at mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls. And the idea is that from there, you never go outside of what the educational people would call your zone of proximal development, which is essentially it's just only learning something that's connected to what you already know. If you learn something that's completely disconnected from what you already know, it's very hard to learn. But if everything that you know is like a sphere of knowledge that grows a little bit, you only learn the stuff that's just outside of your sphere of knowledge, not something way out in the distance. So that's what the blueprint essentially is. And yeah, so that was a long-winded answer to the question of what do you do about incomprehensible input. But I do think it's a very common question, because when people start immersing, they're like, oh my gosh, how do I handle this incomprehensible input thing? And it's like, well, one, you can play a game called What Can I Notice? And two, start building comprehension through learning Chinese characters and mastering individual Chinese syllables through pronunciation. So let me just mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls, just dropping that in the chat in case any of you want to join the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. All right, I'm going to continue here with the next sets of questions. Let's see here. Where do we leave off? Right. So we have, someone says, I'm at the very beginning. I started this month and I want to be fluent. I'm too much of a noob to really answer anything else. Fair enough. Okay. Well, I think the answer I just gave probably gives a fair bit of insight, but I would just say this. If you're just starting off, learn pronunciation first. We have a great video on our channel. I think it's still our most viewed long form video. So if you go to our YouTube channel and check out the most popular videos, you'll find it in the top section. And it's just a comprehensive guide to Mandarin pronunciation. That's a great way to do it. We also have a pronunciation mastery course that is about 8 hours long and goes into all of that. The reason to learn pronunciation first is that it follows you throughout your time of learning Mandarin. It's always relevant. It just becomes less intensive the later you get into it. But everything has a pronunciation, right? Like every word is pronounced a certain way. And if you are learning early how to shape your mouth, where to put your tongue, how to pronounce the tones and the tone pairs, which is very important, how to distinguish between very similar sounding syllables, aka minimal pairs, then you will be setting yourself up for great success. And part of the reason that I know that is because Luke did that and I didn't, right? So Luke Neal, my business partner, he's from the UK and he's got really great sounding Mandarin. Like it's like he and I are both fluent in Mandarin, but man, he sounds great. He sounds just like a native. And the reason is because he focused so much on pronunciation in the early days. Now, I didn't as much. Now, I focused on characters, which is something he didn't. So it's what made us good partners, is that I knew a lot about the writing system and how to learn characters, and he knew a lot about the pronunciation and how to pronounce the syllables. And so we made a good collaborative curriculum creation team at the beginning. But his skill there has always followed him. And in my case, I had to undo a bunch of bad habits. So if I was just starting off right at the beginning, I would say the first thing to do is watch the Mandarin pronunciation video on our channel. And if you want to take it even a little bit further, take pronunciation mastery, which is very, very useful as I believe it's linked below the description of this video to get pronunciation mastery. That's about 8 hours long, and it's very in-depth about how to pronounce things. Okay. Kai says, on paper, I'm HSK 4, but in real life, I feel like a 2 or 3, and I need to get to 6. Okay. So what's blocking is not practicing enough and money. Most times when I look for online sources, it's either too easy or too hard. Right. Okay. Well, yeah, when it comes to, like, if let me see here. Not practicing enough and money. Well, like it's got to be one or the other. You're either going to have to practice a lot or spend some. I mean, if you spend money, you're going to have to practice still. It'll just be more efficient because you won't be wasting time figuring it out on your own. But there's basically no situation where you don't have to practice. So the very first thing I would suggest for you, Kai, is to put in your calendar time that you are going to, maybe all you're going to do is just talk to ChatGPT, perhaps, or maybe, and that could also be writing back and forth. It could be to work on learning individual characters. If you don't know how to learn individual characters well, then researching that. Of course, you could take the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, which is only $7. And if all you do with that is just take the challenge and learn how to do it, and then say, okay, now that I know how to do it, I'll apply this myself. That's fine. You can do that. But regardless, though, if something is a value for you in your life, put it in your calendar as a time that you're going to do it. You know, a lot of times people talk about like motivation. How do I find the motivation to do something and whatever? And like, I think most of you, if you're watching this live stream, you have motivation to learn Chinese. It's just that you're not scheduling it. You know what I mean? Like it's such a simple thing. It was Tim Ferriss who alerted me to this basic idea, which is if you want something to get done, put it in your calendar. Even if it's something that you wouldn't normally think of as being related to someone else, or to doing on your own. Like normally we put things in our calendar that involve someone else, like a meeting or a coffee date or something like that. But put something in your calendar that is a thing that you're planning on doing that is purely for that's like purely for yourself, for your self-development. You guys all have said that you're interested in learning Mandarin, so there should be time put into your calendar to learn Mandarin. It's that as simple as that. So the basic thing I would say, Kai, is schedule the time, get some free resources, do some things like talking to ChatGPT, do some things like using HelloTalk and Tandem so you get some free resources there. If you've got $7, take the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge and learn how to learn characters. Even if that's all you ever buy from us, cool, but like learn how to learn characters, and then you can apply that to your own time. But the main thing, though, is you got to schedule the time. It's got to be in there because Mandarin is not going to get there without direct time scheduled for it on a daily basis. You have to get a little bit better every day, even if it's only like you learned one more fact today than you knew yesterday. Okay, great. At least you are better than yesterday. I'm new to learning Mandarin. Yeah, I answered that earlier, so check it out. You can go back in the stream if you need the answer to that. SpongeBob Lover says, hello, everyone. Do you think it's all right if I only practice reading it first? Yeah, I think that's fine. So first of all, remember with output. So output is just defined as speaking and writing. Input is reading and listening. Another way to think of input is messages that go into your eyes or your ears or both, right? Those language messages that come in through your eyes and your ears are the first step to speaking and writing and thinking, really. Thinking is the ultimate thing, and the thinking produces speech and writing. So if you want to be able to think in the language, because thinking precedes the actual expression. You're not thinking after you speak. It's kind of happening at the same time. Like right as I'm speaking right now, I guess my thoughts are just a fraction of a second ahead of what I'm saying, right? But in order to be able to think in English, I had to have gotten a lot of English messages in my head so that I had anything to say. See what I mean? So if you start with reading, the good element of that is that you end up getting lots of input that you understand without putting pressure on yourself to speak too much. Obviously, at some point you need to speak, but it's okay to have what I call the silent period, right? So at the beginning, you're building comprehension by learning characters. You at least practice your pronunciation by saying things out loud, right? But if you don't want to speak to anybody off the bat because you have nothing to say, that's perfectly reasonable because you have to build up enough comprehension and then get some comprehensible input before you would have anything to say. Like if somebody said like, speak Arabic right now, I'd be like, I can't, I don't know. I don't have anything to say, right? So therefore, if I wanted to speak Arabic, the first thing I would have to do is understand some messages in Arabic and then be in a situation where I need to say it. And so that's fine if you want to focus on reading a bit more at the beginning. Yeah, Chinese is 博大精深, which means vast and broad. So, yeah, absolutely. It's a big task. There's a lot of facts to learn, but, don't let the magnitude of the task stop you from starting on any given day because the time is going to pass anyway. Like, it's really important to understand that, like, I've been interacting with Chinese since 2013. So more like around 11 years now. And it's more than 11 years because it's the beginning of 2013. So if that's the case, then if you're interacting with Chinese for that long, you'd think that must feel like forever. And it's like, no, it just feels like life. The past 11 years were life. And I've been coming into contact with Chinese all that time. And then when I think about it, I'm like, oh, damn, it was 11 years, right? But the time passed. And I'm glad that I had the habit of coming in touch with Chinese in the same way that I'm glad that I had the habit of brushing my teeth and showering all that time. Because had I not done that, well, my life would be very different, right? So, and of course, showering and brushing your teeth are more avoiding a negative outcome than they are pursuing a positive. But there's other things, like I got better at running a business, being a leader, playing drums, having conversations with my friends, building my friendships, building my relationship with my wife. The time is passing. The only question is, what am I valuing and where am I putting my attention? And so if you value Chinese, how vast and broad it is kind of a moot point. Do you want to pursue it or not? If you do, then it's just a question of what are you doing today? And yeah, sure, it lacks structure. That's why we built the blueprint, because we try to give people some structure. But yeah, that's the basic idea. Okay. Reading seems to be much more linear learning curve than listening, where you won't necessarily recognize new vocabulary. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I guess it's comparatively linear, but it's still not. The reason why it's still not linear is because it's like most learning endeavors where you get a lot of gains up front and then you get slowly diminishing gains and then you get increasing gains again. So the reason for that is that, and this is also the Dunning-Kruger too, like you've been doing like 20% of the work and you're like, I'm amazing at Chinese. And then it's like you do a bit more and you're like, oh, actually there's a ton more to learn. And you go into the valley of disappointment, but at least you're not on Mount Stupid anymore. And then of course you spend more time with it and you go, okay, yeah, I got it now. I can communicate fairly well. And the thing about it though is that it's not like in terms of the linear progression. It's definitely not linear. You're right. And it's even more true with listening because, what I find with input is that it's like a key undoes a lock that connects a bunch of different things that were happening in your brain, but you can't really know when that happens. So, for example, let's say it takes 15 instances of seeing a word in context before you really get how it works because the context was good enough. And even that's too pigeonholed because how big of a context and what was your emotions when you were getting the input and all that stuff. But putting that aside for a second, imagine it takes 15 times. Well, those 14 times before you get the 15th time, you were looking at it and it didn't click yet. So you can't notice that you're learning. It's like roots growing into the ground. Nothing has come up onto the surface for you to see. But then on that 15th time, it's like all of those 14 things suddenly, boom, connected in your brain. And now that's a neural network that's connected. And so you have to just kind of stay persistent with the input because on any given day, you're making that 15th connection on some concept and you just didn't realize it. And so you just keep it up and then occasionally you come up and like look at your progress, but mostly just day to day, you just do the stuff necessary. You just get the healthy food. You eat the salad to get the vitamins, you get the comprehensible input into your eyes and ears to get the fluency. It's just, it's just how it works. Bogdan, I'm at level 38 and things became much more complicated with huge amounts of content compared to the previous beginner levels. So I understand it is more important to immerse at this point. Yeah, Bogdan, I would say that at level 38, so you're in the intermediate course. And first of all, it is normal to feel like it's a lot at the beginning of any of the courses. So Mandarin Blueprint has, the Blueprint has 88 levels. The intermediate course is levels 37 through 58. So it is the intermediate plateau. Some call it the swamp. It's the time where you're not yet to B2 fluency like you want to be, but you're also not yet, you know more than the basics. So a lot of the low hanging fruit is already gone. And so it is true that you want to do more immersion, but it's also true that a lot of the immersion will still be quite incomprehensible. So what I would say is that it's important to always at least read the sentences, if not adding them to your flashcards. Totally fine to not add them. And keep doing the characters as much as possible. The characters are essential to getting to a high level of fluency, whereas any one sentence is not. No single message can be considered essential, although it is true to say that every sentence, you have to have a lot of messages. It's just that no one message matters. It's weird, but it's true. And whereas in the case of characters, while it's not quite analogous to saying it's like not learning the letter G and learning English, you need the letter G to understand English. It's not quite that extreme, but if you don't know certain characters, you're simply not going to understand what you're reading. So it's very important that you keep up with the characters, and then at the end of every level, there are audio files with all of the sentences from that level, and when you're listening to that in the background as your immersion material, as some of your immersion material, then you're more likely to understand it because at least it's made up of characters and words you already know, and you've read them at least once on the course. So that way, you start to get that, and of course, also in level 38, you start to get the intermediate graded articles, and so those also come with the audio files that again you can have playing in the background, and that's better than the immersion that is from native content at this point. Eventually you want to get native content because native content's where you go from good to great, but the native content at this point in your journey at level 38 is going to be, it's just very high level. So you have to still play the noticing game. But for you at level 38, the noticing game is more interesting than an absolute beginner, because an absolute beginner, what they can do is maybe I notice a tone here or there, or maybe I noticed a syllable I understand, or maybe I caught a word, that type of thing. But for you, you can probably pick up on lots of different words, and you can also pick up on full phrases or full messages at various moments. But it's just still there's going to be quite a lot that you don't understand. So that's why using the immersion content that we provide in the form of the sentences at the end of each level in the level review, and also the graded articles, that's what will get you to a good level of listening pretty quickly. Groovy Ramen says, if I were to study 3 hours a day with Mandarin Blueprint, how long do you think it would take to reach B2 of the CEFR? I think it would take you somewhere between 800 and 1500 hours, right? So at 3 hours a day, that's 800 divided by 3. So from 266 days to 500 days. So like, and it's a big range. And the reason why it's a big range is because some people say they spent 3 hours on it, and it was 3 hours while they were also being distracted by many other things. And so they're kind of like, we want to put some leeway in there in case people are saying, I studied 3 hours a day. And it's like, if you were able to like see a security camera of what they were doing, they spent like half of the time playing a game on their phone or something while like vaguely seeing the Chinese they were doing. But the other thing is that while it's true that, of course, everybody, regardless of their IQ, if it's above a certain level of IQ, they're able to use language. So anybody can acquire a language. However, IQ does play a little bit of a role in how quickly you're able to get language. And it's enough of a role that I don't feel comfortable saying it's going to be 800 hours for everyone. It's probably going to be 800 hours for smarter people and 1,500 hours for people with a lower IQ. But there's nobody who can't acquire a new language, because think of the least intelligent person you know. Do they use language? Yes. Okay. That means they were able, their brain, the human brain in their head, was capable of acquiring a new language. And so, of course you're capable. The only question is how quickly. And so that's why there's a big variance there. But the reason why I think it's that is we did a lot of analysis. Now, the Foreign Service Institute says that it should take 2,200 hours of full-time study to reach B2 fluency in Mandarin. But the thing is, I don't even believe that with what they say, because their recommendations are based on studying with HSK materials from the Confucius Institute. And man, I hate that stuff. It's so boring. And it's also way too formal. It's not how people actually talk. And it doesn't get you enough spoken practice. And so I don't really even believe their 2,200 hour estimate. I think that it's probably closer to 3,500 hours, because there's going to be so much extra wasted time. So yeah, the answer to it is about 800 to 1,500 hours. Okay. Christina says, hi, love your videos. Learning a lot, but still a beginner. Learning the characters are definitely hard. Pinyin seems easier to learn. Are the specific tips to learn characters? Thanks. Well, Christina, absolutely. Now, first of all, Pinyin will only take you so far, unfortunately, and it's for a very basic reason. Mandarin Chinese only has approximately 420 syllables, give or take, depending on how people categorize it, if you don't account for tones. And if you account for tones, it's like 1,200 syllables. And you might be wondering, is that a lot? Is that a little? Well, English has around 16,000 individual independent syllables, right? So that means that English is a language that can be much more easily auditorily distinguished between the syllables. That means that in Chinese, you're going to hit a ceiling where so many words sound similar to you and you can't make heads or tails of them. And if you don't know the characters, that becomes very hard to understand. So for example, you have all of the, I don't even have to pull out examples. I knew these guys, Marty and Sam, while I was living in Chengdu, and love those guys. Great guys. One guy's a German guy, one's a French guy. And both of them decided, I'm not going to learn the writing. I'm only going to learn the speaking. And their speaking is okay. They can communicate. But they both said, when I asked them, I was like, do you feel like you can continue to improve with your Mandarin? And both of them were like, no, I've absolutely hit a ceiling, because it's just like the terms are getting too confusing. Now, your question, though, is specific tips for learning characters. I'll just tell you this. We came up with an excellent system for learning characters, and we present them in a very logical order called the optimal character learning order. It's patent pending, and it's a part of our course called the Blueprint. Now, the Blueprint is a big old course that is, it's a massive curriculum, and the price reflects that. However, you can get access to the first 3 phases of it for 30 days by taking the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, which is the link linked below. mandarinbp.com/challenge LS. I'll drop that in the chat again. And that is where you can learn about our system for memorizing characters. And I think that somebody here has even said already that their system for learning is actually really, really cool. So, cool. Oh, Lynn, you're giving me traditional characters. How dare you? Let's see here. "这种方式教英文比较日常，综合题目、主句或情绪分析." Right. So you must have been asking that in the context of something there, but you're bringing up, you're saying a comprehensive program to 主句, that would mean pursue sentences, or a feeling, like analyzing your feeling, 情绪分析. And yeah, I would say, I think I get what you're asking here. So like, I think you need a bit of both, right? Language acquisition is an eclectic process, but in Chinese, there's a bunch of stuff to learn, right? So there's a bunch of, there's so many characters to learn that you need to have a little bit of a logical, progressive, systematic way of learning that builds on itself. But we all tell people, in fact, we were just talking about Bogdan earlier, who's in the intermediate course. Of course, at some point, you have to strike out into native content and you have to pursue your interests, because language is an emotional thing. Like you use language to engage emotionally with people who are around you, right? So and to connect, and ultimately it's about love, isn't it? I mean, like, we pursue new knowledge. If you really dig down, I think ultimately the conclusion you come into is love, because I mean, I don't know if there's any capital M meaning in this life, but I do know that the degree to which the people I love can suffer less and experience joy more is a worthy enough pursuit from my perspective. And how can learning Chinese help with that? Well, a bunch of different ways. You know, you can make people laugh. You can do business with them. You can find ways to teach people new things. It can give you new ways to think about the world, new ways to solve problems, which you can then apply to your loved ones. And so I would say that you must use an emotional context at certain points in the process of learning. And so insofar as you need to do that, you should. But at the same time, with Mandarin in particular, especially for native Western speakers, you need to have a systematic, logical way of going through the graded period. Because sure, once you reach a level of fluency where you can understand native speakers and pretty much everything they're saying, then it can be all emotional. But at the beginning, when you don't know anything and you can't understand a lick of what a native speaker is saying, you got to have some system in place. Otherwise, you're just going to get lost. So it's a bit of both is the answer to that question. All right. Thanks. Someone says our system for learning characters is mind-blowing. I agree. Your Chinese sounds so cool, thank you. Listening to you speak in Chinese inspires me even more to want to learn. Well, I'm glad to hear that. "我像你的那个榜样，就让我非常开心，知道吗?" All right. Okay, so Bogdan says the Henza movie method is fine, but at some point there are hundreds of movies and I have issues thinking of new ones and making them memorable. Right. So, okay, here's what I would recommend, Bogdan. A couple things. First of all, making something memorable has a number of different techniques. And here's what I would recommend if that's how you're feeling about it at the moment, which is to try to introduce things that make things more intense, right? So in a sense, you're getting bored, right? But what's not boring? Like, think about the things that aren't boring. So for those of you who don't know what the Henza movie method is, this is going to sound weird for a second, but what's not boring? Well, how about standing outside the front of your house and a bunch of naked people with chainsaws are running at you with murderous rage in their eyes, right? Is that boring? Do you think that you'll remember that one? How about you imagine that somebody, when you're meeting them for the first time and they're telling you their name, that you tell yourself that they're plotting to murder your most loved person in your life, right? But by the way, great trick to learn someone's name, because what that does is it spikes your adrenaline, and you'll be able to memorize the necessary information because you're kind of put into a state of feeling that every piece of information is life or death, and we respond very well to that. So if you're starting to feel like there are so many movies that it's starting to get either boring or just feeling like they're tough to make memorable, you got to raise the stakes. Now, another way to do this, and I would recommend that you go back and check out some of our special effects videos in the early part of the course. And you could also just read our special effects article on our website. So if you're in the course platform, Bogdan, in the sidebar when you're reading on the desktop, you'll see that there are the list of articles that we have that are reference articles, and one of them is our special effects article. That article explains a number of different ways that you can try to make a scene more interesting, because at this point, the mechanics of the method are not a problem for you at all. The mechanics of the method are going to be clear. So what you want instead is to do things to make it more memorable, and by doing that, special effects. So that's things like, we're going to use a Michael Bay camera angle right now and zoom in from a major drone shot on the childhood home bathroom, or you're going to have slow motion, bullet time. You're going to have some things be bright and shiny. You're going to have background music. I use that all the time. I'm a musician, so like my scenes to remember a Chinese character often had like very funny and intense background music, and I did a lot of facial expressions and a lot of stuff where it's like once you get the mechanics down, then adding in these special effects just becomes like this one quick extra step, and that makes it more memorable. Our brains are like so smart that they can do this, but also so dumb. Like sometimes I'm like, I was trying to remember my scene, but what was that one thing? Oh yeah, there was a trophy in the scene. I forgot that the trophy was there. Let me make that trophy bright and shining and warm in my mind, which takes like a second to do, but your brain goes, bright, shiny, and warm. I need to remember that, right? Like it's funny how like our brains can so easily be manipulated by such simple things. So yeah. Right. Yep. Correct. 使用繁体字，您可能来自台湾或香港. Says Russian name that I can't pronounce, but welcome. Or Ukrainian, I don't know. He really speaks like a native speaker. I was shocked when I watched this video. Yeah, certainly Luke does. I speak fine. I think I speak with clear enough. I mean, certainly people can understand me in China, but like he's great. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit more rapid fire because we got some lots of questions coming in. When it comes to what I want from a learning community, I think I want something like accountability buddy. Accountability buddy. It's very easy to phase out of learning if you don't have fixed classes. Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that is definitely a feature of the new community coming up that we're going to build over at school.com, SKOOL.com. And we haven't finished building it yet, but we're going to, and it's going to be great. You're going to love it. So look out for that. And yeah, I agree. I think that we might even incorporate something like a live room that one of our member service team puts together. And it probably wouldn't be something that Luke and I join, but it would be like an accountability, like it could even be daily, just a place where you go in and you just tell people, what did you do this week? And there's somebody there to listen to it, right? And if you join, you get points in the forum and you grow on the leaderboard, and the people who are in the leaderboard, they get special prizes and stuff. There's so much stuff we're going to do. So I can't wait. Oh, I thought I sent a link earlier, but apparently not. That's weird. Anyway, so continuing. When it comes to learning a Chinese language, where should someone channel his or her energy to? Comprehensible input. If there was one thing I could say, and you want to expand that framework, build comprehension, get comprehensible input, activate what you understood, right? So build comprehension is learning characters and learning pronunciation, and it's learning the top 1,000 words, because in order to learn the top 1,000 words, you don't really have enough grammar yet to be able to put them in context, so you have to consciously learn them. But that's basically how you build comprehension at the beginning, and then that gives you enough characters and words to put into sentences, which then gets you comprehensible input. Getting comprehensible input is the key to language acquisition. The more messages you get into your eyes and ears that you understand, the faster you acquire a language. And then in order to get good at output, you simply have to speak and write the things that you've understood before. And what happens is that if you've gotten enough comprehensible input, speaking and writing is like magic. And your brain rises to the occasion when you're faced with a problem, because you've gotten enough input for it to make sense. Rick is showering on camera. This is unbelievable. All right. What I meant is, should the energy be more on learning the characters, pinyin, or memorizing what you hear? So, I mean, it's not about memorizing what you hear. It's about understanding what you hear. Characters, absolutely. Pinyin is honestly, pinyin doesn't take that long. So you can learn pinyin from a few articles, and we have the pronunciation video on our YouTube channel. Pinyin is not like a huge challenge. What is getting enough characters. So you do have to learn those, and you should focus on that. But you don't want to memorize what you hear. You just want to understand. There's no point in memorizing a bunch of sentences, because life is too complicated for that. Life demands that you think, right? That's the thing I keep getting on about. But we're not in acquiring a new language to recite a bunch of memorized phrases. We want to be able to think in the language. Thinking helps you connect, and connection is what we're, all about. We like to connect with people. We like to connect with our loved ones. And so if you understand, that gives you a brick that you're adding to your fluency castle, let's say. And that brick is how that builds is that it allows you to think when the time comes. I have said a number of sentences that I've never read before, because my brain gets how the structure of the language is after hearing enough of it. And so after hearing enough of the language, I can now say things without having necessarily read them before in the specifics, but I have read before the pattern. It's the patterns you want to get down, and then the vocabulary fills those patterns. All right. Chinese is about copying. Until you make 100 copies of a character, you won't learn it. Therefore, you need to study, and study again. I think you can learn a character without copying it 100 times by using good mnemonic methods. mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls to let me prove that to you. Okay, let's see here. Great to be here from Uganda. Welcome. How can this channel help my community and I benefit from learning Chinese? I would just say, Philip, great name, that if you watch our long form videos, we cover a lot of Chinese topics there, and the live streams. Eventually, the live streams are going to be moving over to school.com, but I'm still doing it on YouTube for now. But we're going to make a free school community at some point as well, and I think it's all going to be happening relatively soon. There is going to be a qualification for joining the school community, and you know what? I'll just give you guys a little bit of insight here to what the qualification is going to be. We are only interested in catering to people who are very serious about learning Chinese. So originally we were like, people were like, well, why don't you make something that's just for, dabblers, somebody who's just going to travel to China for like a couple of weeks. And, we have courses that fit that, but I only want people who are like, I'm doing it. I'm going to get to fluency one way or another, by hook or by crook. You can't stop me. Those are the people I want in the Mandarin Blueprint community, because trying to cater to people who are just dabbling is it's not gratifying, because ultimately you can't really dabble in Chinese and create a long-term skill. All you can do is have a slightly better experience while in China, and I think that's fine, but I also just think a phrase book does the trick there. You know what I mean? So we're only going to be catering to people in that community who say and commit to the idea of, I am serious about learning Chinese and I'm going to engage in this community. And if I don't engage in this community for more than 30 days, then I'm not going to be able to stay in it. It's going to be something like that. So but it will be free though. The one of them, there's going to be another one that's paid that has to do with our courses. Okay. I'm on level 24 right now. Reading characters is easier and more efficient than reading pinyin. Glad to hear that, Mr. YouTube. The words are very similar, so you should always pay attention to the context, right? Without understanding the context, you won't understand what we're talking about. Absolutely. And I would say that the context also should be ever expanding. The better you get at Mandarin, the more context you should have. So one of the mistakes I made in my learning journey was I spent too long at the sentence level. So I learned that if you know sentences, technically that's comprehensible input. So just get a bunch of sentences. And so I had all these flashcards and I was doing lots of flashcard sentences. And I felt like, this is great. And it was useful. I'm not denying that getting any comprehensible sentence is useful, but it's like the context is limited to one sentence. And so therefore you don't know the emotional context usually, right? Whereas if you read, like, here's a perfect example. If I say, I will never leave you. Doesn't that sound nice? I will never leave you. What is that, like a husband saying it to his wife? Oh, it's so nice. I will never leave you. Well, what if it came at the end of this sentence? I've had you locked in my basement for 35 years. No matter what you do or where you go, I will always make sure your chains are never removed. Every day as you live your life, you'll always see me in your dreams. I will never leave you. Well, suddenly the exact same set of mouth noises is horrible, right? Like, so you need more context to be able to understand the deeper meanings of something when certain words are used. But here's the thing though, one step at a time. You can't do everything at once. So just build up to that point. The reason I harp on it sometimes is because I personally got stuck at a certain level. I did way too long in the, reading sentences level. So I just hope other people don't fall into that same trap as I did. Right. So Lynn's saying that looking for some TV channels. I mean, yeah, I think that there are definitely some comprehensible input YouTube channels. So, you can check that out. I think that there's a lot of that around. And there's lots of live Chinese TV on YouTube, I've noticed. And there's also live Taiwanese TV. So if you're looking for, I'm just actually curious here. Let me just go on YouTube and see if I can find any live Taiwanese TV. Oh my gosh. As soon as I signed in, the first suggestion was live TV in Chinese. You're listening to me, but I am literally streaming to YouTube right now. So I suppose, live Taiwan TV. Do we have anything? Let's see here. Immediately found it. So yeah, now of course it's news, so that's pretty tough. But I'm just saying that there are probably some live TV channels that you can check out at some point. So that's kind of cool. All right, let's see here. Is there any version of accent of Mandarin that is more universal? This is a good question from Ray. So it depends on how you want to think of this. So I can tell you this. If you are a broadcaster of Mandarin and you study broadcasting in university, the answer is absolutely yes. They are very strict about how you broadcast in Mandarin Chinese. And that type of 播音系, which is the broadcasting department, people who are in that speak with a very perfected and perfect standard Mandarin. However, nobody actually speaks standard Mandarin 100%. The closest place is the capital of Hebei province, which is Shijiazhuang, and they speak the closest thing to standard Mandarin, but their local dialect is still only about 91% Mandarin. Now, a lot of people, though, will say, well, wait, if Mandarin isn't spoken as the native dialect of anybody, then why shouldn't I learn something else? I still think you should learn Mandarin because everybody knows Mandarin. It is the language that unites the people, right? So like all of the people in mainland China speak Mandarin. And so they also have their local dialect, which can vary in how different it is from Mandarin. Obviously, if you're in Shijiazhuang, then it's not that different. But if you're in, say, Fujian, then it might be quite different. But you'll still know Mandarin. Like you'll still be aware of it. You'll still know how to pronounce it and all of that. And so the answer is that on the one hand, yes, if you're talking about broadcasters, but on the other hand, no, considering that everybody has their own local dialect. I mean, China is as big as Europe and has more people, right? So of course, there are a lot of different dialects and things that you might consider to be even totally different languages. However, they share a writing system and they all, generally speaking, especially if you're under the age of 50 at this point, you know Mandarin, right? Even if you don't consider it your first language or your first dialect. So it's like yes and no, depending on which question you're answering. What do you think of the app Hello Chinese? I haven't used it, so I can't speak to that, I'm afraid. Sorry, Groovy Ramen. Hi from Brazil. Hi, Daniel. If you want to learn Mandarin for Taiwan, then it makes sense. But if you want to learn Mandarin for Hong Kong, then you need to learn Cantonese. Not me. Absolutely. Yep. And I mean, again, people in Hong Kong do tend to know Mandarin more and more, although it is a little bit different. Like in Hong Kong, because they were kind of independent from China for a long time, lots of people know English. And but these days, I mean, considering that mainland China is getting a little bit more involved in Hong Kong, the demand to learn Mandarin has gone up quite a bit. I had a company, our company was based out of Hong Kong for a while. Now it's based in the US, but it was based out of Hong Kong for a while. And whenever I would call the bank, it was Cantonese first, Mandarin second, and then English third for the, like what they would say on the like automated call line. So, yeah. Let's see here. By the way, I don't know why that link I sent there came out so weird. Let me just mandarinbp.com/challenge-ls. I meant to send that into the chat earlier. This is the link to our Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. $7 gets you to basic literacy in 30 days, and it will help apply a lot of the stuff I've been talking about in this stream. So, check that out if you wish. Okay. All right. I think we offended Lynn, who is actually Taiwanese. Let's see here. Beijing dialect is most correct. I mean, I would say the Shijiazhuang dialect is closest to correct. But yeah, Beijing is Beijing and Shijiazhuang are not far from each other. Beijing just does have its own pretty distinct kind of... I lived in Beijing for a couple of years. It's like very hua, so if somebody's from Beijing, they might be like, 大家好，我是大康，今天我们要讲特别的有意思的话题。这儿有什么样的一个 It's kind of got that it's kind of how it sounds a little bit, but a more standard Mandarin. I mean, there's all sorts. There's the advertisement Mandarin, like the 你们今天可以过来买一些东西，拨打66776677. It's like got this like funny sort of sound to it, like any advertisement would, or maybe it's the movie title. 好久以前有一个新动物悄然诞生. Right, like kind of having that kind of crazy attitude there. And there's a million other little differences, but most people just speak in a kind of casual way, So, let's see here. I'm at the point where I ran out of Henza movie stories, so I started making really silly stories. Sometimes I don't have to recall the whole story to remember everything. I just remember one detail. Yeah, that can happen, Mr. YouTube. That can absolutely happen. And that's great, right? That just means that you're quickly able to acquire a new character without having to put as much effort in. There's not as much brain power necessary. Oh, right. Yeah, Laura says, I'll probably never forget Tong, because I hear The Sorcerer's Apprentice when I hear it, and Tong is two people following each other. So yeah, just like The Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia, which, by the way, Fantasia I appreciate now as an adult, but as a kid, I hated it because I had, I was a kid, it was like VHS tapes on the, I'm 36, so there's VHS tapes on the, the rack, and there was a bunch of Disney movies there, and Fantasia was, and most Disney movies were like, it's a story with a hero, and then Fantasia is just like a bunch of music and stuff, and I was like, I don't want this, I want The Lion King or something, but now as an adult, I'm like, that's awesome. It's probably my favorite. Happy to help, Chioma. All right. Many students have been recommending Mandarin Blueprint. Great work, guys. Do you have an affiliate program? Thanks. Not really right now. It's one of those things like, as many businesses start off, they get excited by lots of ideas. It's like, oh, we could have an affiliate program. We could have a referral program. We could have a YouTube channel, paid ads. We could do all this stuff and you end up focusing on so many things that you don't do any of them well, right? And so what we decided is that we are going to focus on making great content that we put on our YouTube channel, quality Chinese learning content. If you're interested in us helping you along the journey, we have a paid product, but you can always get stuff from us for free. And now we're going to even be introducing a free community element to it as well. And again, with a paid option, but if you just want to do the free one, that's fine too. And so this is what kind of makes it so that, you're not like, I think it's just very common for people to focus too much on like, we're just going to do a bunch of paid ads. And like, yeah, I do think we'll do paid advertisement at some point, but like most of the time I think that if you're not ready to do that and give that your focus, then you shouldn't do it half-assed. You know what I mean? Like do it fully, but do it when you've already got a great process in place for doing another thing that's a way to get people to know about what you're doing. So my feeling is that I feel the most okay like about the idea of making a bunch of free content that's valuable and then just saying, here's the information. And if you would like us to help you implement it, that there's a paid product. I feel like good about that as a business owner. I feel like that's not letting anybody down. It's always making sure that we give value first. And then if we happen to also have somebody who wants to move through that value faster, they can do that with our paid products. But it's like, I always want to make sure that there's something that we're giving away for free that is actually just valuable and doesn't demand anything other than time, So yeah. So not really at the moment is the answer. 大书中文. All right. Cool. Practice sounds good. Excellent. All right. Well, folks, I think I've hit the end of the chat, I think. I don't know. Is there any more? Oh, wait, maybe there's some more that's come through. Here we go. Our 话音 is perfect. Not really. It's like I'm listening to 东北人. Yeah,东北. I like that's referring to the northeast of China. 黑龙江, Jilin, and Liaoning are what are considered the northeast. And a lot of cool places there. Dalian is a really cool city in Liaoning province that I like a lot. Went there a couple times. Port city, almost has a European influence, which makes sense. I suppose it was probably, being a port city, it probably did a lot of trade historically. Harbin, which is in the capital of Heilongjiang, is definitely a beautiful place to go for the ice festival in the winter, but it is cold. Like, Northeast China in the winter, think Siberia in Russia. It's really cold. Like it's weird because it's not that far north compared to like the northeast of the United States. It's a little bit more north, but man, really cold, but also an awesome place. So, when you started working and living in China, did you already know Chinese or did you start learning it in China? I started learning in China. So, while it's true that I knew a little bit, like I learned some characters before going to China as like a preparation, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have any good like method for learning. And then I definitely took a couple of years where I wasn't really learning at the beginning. Which I wish I had. I got to China in 2011, and I didn't really start studying in earnest until 2013. But I also, I did eventually get into it and really into it. And then, of course, we talk about this in our webinar. But my first year, I was like making all the mistakes that you can make and just struggling and being frustrated and following the advice of Chinese teachers who were giving me bad advice and following the advice of Chinese tutors. And it was miserable. I hated it. I almost quit. And then the second year, Luke and I met, we exchanged some notes and we figured out a bunch of stuff and we started listening to some polyglots and people who really knew about language acquisition, and we developed our own system. And in the next year, we had so much success in 1 year that we realized, oh, we need to sell this as a course because nobody else around us at Sichuan University is doing this. Like they're struggling so much with their Chinese classes and we're not. And they're suffering, and like we have the alleviation to the suffering in our system. So that's a business. So we decided to start building the Mandarin Blueprint method. And at the time, the thing that really made me go, we need to do this, is that we sat the HSK 6 test and passed it after only 2 years of study, when the first year was like not any good. Like the first year, I mean, it's not like there was nothing we did that was good in the first year. It's just compared to the second year when we fixed so many of our problems, it was crazy. So yeah. Let's see here. Kathleen says you're enjoying the channel. Glad to hear that. You're absolutely right about Harbin. Yep. Yeah. In the Henza movie method, how do you know when there's no final / when to use your childhood home? Yeah, so that's a technical question about the Henza movie method. So basically, if you look at the Henza movie method pinyin chart, which is linked in the sidebar, you can see the initials that where you do your childhood home. And it basically just comes down to this. I mean, I don't want to get too technical here on the live stream because that's a very like in the weeds question. I can say that we have an article called "Why is the HMM Pinyin chart different from the regular Pinyin chart?" and it explains all of this in great detail. I'll just say it like this. We made a very basic decision that people can remember more faces than they can remember places, and it's better to connect the faces with the Pinyin initials, but there are more Pinyin finals than there are Pinyin initials. So by rejiggering the Pinyin chart, we were able to create more initials and fewer finals, so you could have more faces and fewer places to remember. People are good at remembering faces. Like if I can bring up like loads of celebrities or political figures or whatever, and you can immediately imagine their face. But places, it's just, we've all been to a lot of places, but there's probably not as many. So we wanted it to be fewer places and more faces. So that's why we did it. My recommendation would just be go to the sidebar of the course where it says, there's an article that says, why is the Henza movie method Pinyin chart different from the original? And that explains all of it in great detail. And if you still have any questions, let me know. Welcome back. Yep, I completely agree, Lynn, that it's good to learn languages. You can subtly make life better after knowing different cultures deeply. Absolutely. I completely agree. The time I spent in China is like, the imprint it's made on my heart will go all the way to the end. There's no doubt about it. What an amazing experience. And so I completely agree. Cool. Ultimately, 2 of my sets are fictional. Yeah, Laura, I understand, right? Like you have to find places that are a little bit fictional, but what's amazing is that we can easily imagine a fictional place. I mean, anybody who has ever designed a house, it started with something that doesn't exist and then made it, right? So we can imagine a room. Like, let me just imagine a brand new living room that I've never seen before. Interesting. I can immediately think of a bunch, right? Because we've seen so many living rooms that the idea of a living room is easy to imagine. So yeah, you could totally make and what's cool is that if it was imaginary, if it was like an imaginary place, you could make it as like you would have an unlimited budget to do whatever you wanted with it. That's kind of cool. Let's see here. Nice. Hi, folks. 你好，帅哥。我不是一个帅哥，我是个叔叔。Is listening to Chinese vids useful even if I don't understand anything? Here's what I'll say. I answered that very question at the beginning of this stream, so I'll just ask you to head back to the beginning. It was like the first question I answered after the 10 minutes of waiting for the stream to start. So that's all I'll say there. Just go back and check that out. But guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. And I would just remind you that if you'd like to sign up for the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, you can do that at Mandarin BP for Blueprint, mandarinbp.com/challenge LS. That tells us you came from the live stream. Very useful for us to know that. Is the live stream worth doing? I don't know. But if people sign up from the live stream for the challenge, then at least I know you guys are engaging with our stuff and you enjoy it. So I'll drop that in the chat again here. mandarinbp.com/challenge LS. And one last question I will take. I have a problem with changing tones while shadowing. Anything you recommend that might help me? Slow it down and shadow less. So if you're shadowing a paragraph, shadow a sentence. If you're shadowing a sentence, shadow a word. Slow it down. And if you get to the point where you're down, and if you, by the way, if you're shadowing a word and that you're not getting that, then go down to just the character. And if you can't pronounce the individual character, then watch our pronunciation mastery video on that syllable. And at that point, if you still can't do it, I don't know what to tell you at that point. I guess I maybe speak to a speech therapist at that point, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, because at that point you're really breaking it down. But as usual with education, I go, if you don't know how to do something, just keep breaking it down, So yeah. Okay. So in China, I'll just mention this. Mr. Denver 009 says, 你一点都不算是叔叔吧？没有什么老. And so what he's saying is you don't look like an uncle, right? Which is basically like a colloquial term for a middle-aged man in China. But here's the thing. I was in China and I watched people go from calling me a 帅哥 to calling me 叔叔. It's probably because I'm bald. So it's just like they just, as I grew a little bit older, it's like parents talking to their kids, right? Like they're like, maybe their kids are amazed that there's a white guy near them and they're like looking at me and they're like, the mom will say to the kid, 说帅哥你好, right? Like, so saying to the kid, say to the handsome man, you're hello, right? And as I got older, it changed to, 给叔叔说你好, right? And I was like, I'm a 叔叔 now. And I don't mind. I've enjoyed entering into middle age. I hope I can do it with grace and alacrity and all of that good stuff. So thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful to stream for you today. And mandarinbp.com/challenge LS. Check it out, and we'll catch